I was 32 years old, a successful software engineer with everything going for me. Amanda and I had been engaged for 3 years and were just weeks away from our dream wedding at my Uncle Richard's estate. My family had always been close-knit, especially my cousin Jackson, who was like a brother to me. I never imagined the people I trusted most would betray me in the worst possible way. Before I tell you how my world collapsed and how I rebuilt it stronger than before, let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when everyone else lets you down. I grew up in Portland with a tight-knit family that always emphasized loyalty and togetherness. After graduating with my computer science degree, I landed a job at a promising tech startup. The hours were long, but the work was rewarding, and I was quickly moving up the ranks. Despite my busy schedule, I always made time for family gatherings. That is how important they were to me. I met Amanda at my college friend Dave's wedding 4 years ago. She was a bridesmaid, and I was a groomsman. We were paired to walk down the aisle together, and something just clicked between us. She had this infectious laugh that could light up a room and warm brown eyes that seemed to see right through me. Amanda worked as a marketing executive at a local firm and was as ambitious as I was. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown, where we talked until the owner had to politely ask us to leave because they were closing. Things progressed naturally from there. Weekend dates turned into meeting each other's friends, then family. After a year, we decided to move in together. We found a cozy apartment with a view of the city and filled it with dreams of our future. We talked about having 2 kids, buying a house in the suburbs, and even which schools they might attend someday. I thought we were building something unbreakable. My family welcomed Amanda with open arms, especially my cousin Jackson. He was 30, just 2 years younger than me, and we had always been close growing up. Jackson had a charismatic personality, but struggled to find his footing professionally. He had jumped from one failed business venture to another, always with the safety net of my Uncle Richard's money to catch him. Uncle Richard was the patriarch of our family, a successful real estate developer worth millions. He was 58, intimidating, and used his wealth to maintain control over the family. He had helped fund my parents' retirement, paid for my sister's medical school, and repeatedly bailed out Jackson's business failures. With his gray hair and tailored suits, he carried himself like a man who was used to getting what he wanted. My parents practically worshipped Uncle Richard. Dad had worked for one of Richard's companies for 20 years before retirement, and Mom was always quick to remind us how fortunate we were to have such a generous relative. They never questioned his decisions or methods even when I thought they should. Amanda seemed to fit perfectly into this family dynamic. She charmed Uncle Richard with her business acumen and became fast friends with Jackson. I was thrilled to see her building relationships with the people I cared about most. After dating for 2 years, I knew Amanda was the one. I proposed at the exact spot where we had first met at Dave's wedding, now renovated as a public garden. I had arranged for our families to be hiding nearby, and when she said yes, they all came running out to celebrate with us. The ring had been my grandmother's reset with a modern touch. Amanda cried when I slipped it on her finger, saying it was perfect. We set our wedding date for the following summer and accepted Uncle Richard's offer to host the ceremony and reception at his expansive estate. He insisted on covering most of the costs, saying it was his gift to us. Everything was falling into place, and I had never been happier. As the wedding planning intensified, Amanda began spending more time with Jackson, who offered to help coordinate with vendors since his schedule was flexible. At the time, I appreciated his involvement and Amanda's dedication to creating our perfect day. There were small moments that should have raised my suspicions, like finding them laughing over inside jokes, or the way their conversations would sometimes stop when I entered a room. But I trusted them both completely. That was my first mistake. The weekend before our wedding, Uncle Richard invited the entire family to his lake house for what he called a pre-wedding celebration. It was meant to be a relaxed few days of swimming, boating, and family bonding before the big event. I arrived early on Friday to help set up, expecting Amanda and Jackson to join us later that afternoon. I was carrying extra towels to the guest bedrooms when I heard it. Amanda's distinctive laugh coming from behind a closed door. Thinking she had arrived early to surprise me, I opened the door without knocking. The image is still burned into my brain. Amanda and Jackson, my fiancé and my cousin, tangled in each other's arms on the bed. They jumped apart when the door opened, but it was too late. I had seen everything. Time seemed to stop as we stared at each other. Amanda was the first to speak my name, coming out as a choked whisper. Jackson stood frozen, his face pale with shock. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. I do not remember exactly what I said in those first moments. The shock had turned my thoughts into static. I do know I asked how long this had been going on. Jackson muttered something about it just happening. A weak excuse that crumbled instantly under Amanda's tearful confession. 6 months. They had been seeing each other behind my back for 6 months, starting shortly after Jackson began helping with the wedding planning. Half a year of lies, secret meetings, and betrayal, while I remained oblivious, excitedly planning our future. I turned and walked out of the room, ignoring their calls for me to come back to let them explain. What explanation could possibly justify what they had done? My legs carried me blindly through the house until I found myself in the backyard, gasping for air that would not seem to fill my lungs. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, expecting either Amanda or Jackson, ready to unleash the anger that was beginning to replace the shock. Instead, I found myself face to face with Uncle Richard. His expression told me everything. He knew. He guided me to his private study, closed the door, and poured 2 glasses of expensive whiskey. I noticed his hands were steady, while mine trembled. He sat across from me and spoke in that calculated, controlled voice he used for business negotiations. Richard explained that he had become aware of Amanda and Jackson's affair a few weeks ago. He had chosen not to tell me, hoping it would fizzle out before the wedding. When I asked why he would keep something so important from me, his answer was simple and cold. Family image, appearances, the financial investments already made in the wedding. He spoke about my heartbreak as if it were a minor inconvenience, a small obstacle in the grand scheme of his family empire. Then came the offer. He would give me $50,000 to keep quiet about the affair. We could postpone the wedding, give Amanda and me time to work through this rough patch, as he called it. No one outside the family would ever need to know what had happened. I was stunned by his callousness. This was not a business deal to be negotiated. This was my life, my future, my trust, shattered into pieces. I refused his money and told him I would not be part of a cover-up. The truth needed to come out, and Amanda and Jackson needed to face the consequences of their actions. Richard's demeanor changed instantly. His offer of money transformed into a thinly veiled threat. He reminded me how interconnected our family finances were, how much my parents relied on his support for their retirement, how many family members were employed by his companies. His message was clear. Think about what this would do to the family name and finances before you make a rash decision. I left his study more confused and hurt than before. I needed allies, people I could trust to support me through this nightmare. My parents had always taught me the importance of honesty and integrity. Surely they would stand by me. With this hope, I sought them out, finding them in Richard's kitchen preparing snacks for the gathering. I pulled my parents aside, my voice breaking as I explained what I had discovered. Their initial reactions were appropriately shocked and sympathetic. Mom hugged me while Dad patted my shoulder awkwardly. Then I told them about Uncle Richard's attempt to buy my silence, expecting their outrage to match my own. Instead, their expressions changed subtly. They exchanged a look I could not quite interpret. Mom spoke first, her tone cautious and measured. She suggested that perhaps Uncle Richard had a point about handling this situation quietly. Dad nodded in agreement, mentioning that these things happen in relationships, and with proper counseling, Amanda and I might be able to move past this. I could not believe what I was hearing. I reminded them that their future daughter-in-law had been sleeping with their nephew for months, betraying not just me, but the entire family. How could they expect me to simply forgive and forget? Dad shifted uncomfortably before admitting the truth. Uncle Richard had been significantly supplementing their retirement fund for years. The modest pension Dad had earned would not have been enough to support their lifestyle. If I created a public scandal, Richard might withdraw his financial support, leaving them vulnerable in their golden years. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own parents were choosing money over my heartbreak, financial security over my dignity, Uncle Richard's approval over their own son's well-being. In that moment, I felt truly alone. Before I could fully process this betrayal, Uncle Richard called a family meeting in the living room. Amanda and Jackson sat together on the sofa, their guilty expressions doing nothing to ease my growing anger. My parents positioned themselves near Richard, while other family members filled the remaining seats confused about the sudden gathering. Richard took control immediately, explaining that there had been a complication with the wedding plans. He spoke in vague terms about Amanda and Jackson making a mistake that had hurt me deeply. He never used the words affair or cheating, sanitizing their betrayal into something that sounded like a minor misunderstanding. Then came his proposed solution. The wedding would be postponed, but not canceled. Amanda and I would seek counseling to rebuild trust. Jackson would distance himself temporarily, but remain part of the family circle. The official story for friends and extended family would be that we needed more time to prepare for our perfect day. Jackson offered what he clearly thought was an apology, saying he never meant for things to go this far. He mentioned that Uncle Richard had just approved funding for his newest business idea, a detail that felt deliberately included to remind everyone of Richard's financial control over the family. Amanda tried to take my hand, tears streaming down her face as she begged for a second chance. She mentioned the non-refundable deposits, the custom dress, the honeymoon arrangements, as if these material concerns should outweigh her complete betrayal of my trust. I looked to my parents, silently pleading for them to stand up for me. Mom avoided my eyes, staring at her clasped hands. Dad cleared his throat and expressed support for Richard's plan, calling it a sensible approach to a delicate situation. Something broke inside me then. I stood up, cutting off Uncle Richard mid-sentence. I told them all exactly what I thought of their plan, their cover-up, their willingness to sacrifice my happiness for the sake of appearances and money. I declared that the wedding was not postponed, but canceled effective immediately. Then I walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and be reasonable. Over the next 24 hours, my phone filled with messages. Richard demanded I return to discuss things like an adult. My parents pleaded with me to reconsider, citing family unity. Amanda's messages oscillated between apologies and accusations, suggesting I was overreacting to what she called a mistake. Only Jackson remained silent. His absence from the barrage of communication, its own kind of statement. I checked into a hotel in the city, needing space to think. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold clarity. I called my best friend Tyler, the one person I knew had no connections to my family's finances or drama. He came to the hotel immediately, bringing takeout food I could not eat, and offering the simple support of someone who was unquestionably on my side. As I explained the situation to Tyler, the full picture became clearer. My family had been operating under Uncle Richard's influence for so long that they had lost their moral compass. Money, appearances, and Richard's approval had become more important than truth, loyalty, or basic human decency. I realized I had a choice. I could fall in line like everyone else, or I could stand up for myself even if it meant standing alone. The next morning, I contacted the family lawyer, Martin, whom I had known since childhood. I needed to understand the legal ramifications of canceling the wedding and potentially cutting ties with my family. Martin seemed uncomfortable discussing anything that might go against Richard's wishes, which only confirmed my suspicions about how far my uncle's influence reached. During our conversation, Martin accidentally revealed something concerning about family finances. He quickly tried to backtrack, but his slip had given me a crucial piece of information. Uncle Richard had been using family businesses, including the company my father had worked for, to engage in questionable tax practices. Nothing explicitly illegal, perhaps, but definitely in an ethical gray area that would not hold up well to scrutiny. This revelation presented me with a moral dilemma. I had no desire to destroy my family despite their betrayal. My goal was not revenge, but freedom. A clean break that would allow me to rebuild my life on my terms. After careful consideration, I decided to use this information as leverage, not as a weapon. I arranged a private meeting with Uncle Richard at his office downtown. He seemed surprised by my business-like demeanor, probably expecting either continued emotional outbursts or meek acceptance of his plan. Instead, I presented him with 2 folders. The first contained evidence of his financial manipulations compiled with the help of a trusted accountant friend of Tyler's. The second held my terms. Complete financial separation from the family businesses for me. A public acknowledgement of the real reason for the wedding cancellation. A guarantee that my parents' retirement fund would remain untouched, regardless of my actions. I made it clear that if he did not agree to these terms, the information in the first folder would find its way to the appropriate authorities. Richard's face flushed with anger. He called me ungrateful, manipulative, a traitor to the family. I remained calm, reminding him that I had learned these tactics from watching him operate over the years. After his anger subsided, Replaced by a calculating look I knew well, he reluctantly agreed to my terms. We shook hands like business adversaries, the uncle-nephew relationship irreparably altered. With Uncle Richard's reluctant agreement secured, I moved forward with my plan. I personally wrote and sent cancellation announcements to all wedding guests. The message was brief but honest. The wedding was canceled due to Amanda's infidelity with my cousin Jackson. I offered no elaborate details, but refused to hide behind convenient excuses like different directions or growing apart. The truth was painful, but liberating. The fallout was immediate and intense. My phone exploded with messages from shocked friends and relatives. Some offered sympathy and support, others expressed disbelief, and a few criticized me for airing family matters so publicly. I responded to supportive messages with gratitude and ignored the rest. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard called an emergency family meeting from which I was deliberately excluded. I learned about it through Tyler, whose girlfriend was friends with my cousin Sarah. Apparently, Richard was furious about my cancellation announcement, seeing it as a direct challenge to his authority. The family was divided, with most following Richard's lead in condemning my actions, while a few questioned why they were defending Amanda and Jackson's behavior. My parents showed up at my apartment the next day, their faces drawn with worry. Mom had been crying, and Dad looked older than I had ever seen him. They begged me to retract the cancellation notice to find a way to smooth things over with Richard. They said I did not understand the consequences of antagonizing him. I invited them in and listened calmly to their concerns. When they finished, I explained that I understood perfectly well what was at stake. I told them about my deal with Richard, assuring them their financial security was protected. Then I asked them a simple question. When had money become more important than their son's happiness and dignity? The question hung in the air between us. Dad broke, first admitting that they had become too dependent on Richard's generosity over the years. What had started as occasional help had gradually transformed into a golden cage they could not escape. Mom cried as she acknowledged they had failed me when I needed them most, choosing the security of Richard's money over standing up for what was right. It was a painful conversation, but also the most honest one we had had in years. I did not fully forgive them, but I began to understand how they had become entangled in Richard's web of financial control. They left with the relationship damaged, but not destroyed, with a tentative plan to begin establishing their financial independence from Uncle Richard. Amanda made several attempts to see me in the weeks that followed. She came to my workplace, sent letters, and even enlisted mutual friends to plead her case. During one particularly emotional phone call, she revealed that Jackson had already moved on, showing interest in a real estate agent who worked for one of Richard's companies. The information confirmed what I already suspected: their affair had been built on opportunity and excitement, not genuine love. I agreed to meet Jackson just once at a neutral coffee shop downtown. I wanted to understand why my cousin, someone I had grown up with and trusted, would betray me so completely. His explanation was both predictable and disappointing. He had always lived in my shadow, he said. The successful cousin with the real career, the loving relationship, the respect of the family, taking Amanda, had been a way to claim something that was mine, to prove he could compete on my level. As he spoke, I realized Jackson was as trapped in Richard's influence as my parents were, perhaps more so. He had never developed his own identity, separate from being Richard's protege and my lesser counterpart. I felt no forgiveness toward him, but the anger began to transmute into something like pity. Not everyone in the family sided with Richard. Several cousins and my sister Natalie reached out privately to express their support. They admitted feeling intimidated by Richard's power in the family, but admired my courage in standing up to him. These connections, though tenuous, helped me feel less isolated as I navigated my new reality. 6 months after the canceled wedding, I had settled into a different rhythm of life. I had moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city, one without memories of Amanda. The promotion I had been working toward came through partly because I had channeled my emotional energy into exceptional work performance. My team lead commented that my focus and determination had reached new levels. Through Tyler, I developed a new social circle, completely separate from my family connections. These people knew my story but did not define me by it. We went hiking, attended concerts, and had dinner parties where no one monitored their words for fear of Richard's disapproval. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged under family expectations and relationship compromises. Therapy became an essential part of my healing process. My therapist, Dr. Keller helped me process the multiple layers of betrayal I had experienced and rebuild my capacity for trust. I also took up rock climbing, finding that the physical challenge and focus required left no room for dwelling on past hurts. A new connection entered my life unexpectedly through work. Zoe, a graphic designer who joined our marketing team, approached projects with a creativity and integrity that I found compelling. Our collaboration on a major client presentation evolved into coffee breaks, then lunch conversations, and eventually dinner outside of work. I was transparent with Zoe about my recent past, wary of rushing into another relationship before I had fully processed the previous one. She appreciated my honesty and shared her own story of rebuilding after a difficult divorce. We agreed to develop our friendship first, with an openness to something more, when we were both ready. The lack of pressure and genuine connection felt healing in itself. 7 months after the canceled wedding, I attended my cousin Sarah's wedding. It was my first time seeing many family members since the dramatic cancellation of my own ceremony. The atmosphere was tense at first. Amanda was not present, but Jackson was along with Uncle Richard and my parents. I maintained my composure throughout the event, exchanging polite greetings with Jackson and Richard while focusing on celebrating Sarah's happiness. Several relatives who had initially criticized my decisions approached me with awkward apologies or expressions of newfound respect. The family dynamics had shifted subtly, but significantly. Most surprisingly, my parents had begun taking small steps toward independence from Richard's influence. Dad had taken a part-time consulting position, and Mom had started selling her handmade jewelry online. They were not yet fully free from Richard's financial support, but they were moving in that direction, rebuilding their relationship with me in the process. By the 1-year mark of what would have been my wedding day, the acute pain had faded into occasional twinges of sadness for what might have been. More often, I felt gratitude for the escape from a marriage that would have been built on deception. The experience had forced me to define my own values and boundaries, separate from family expectations or relationship compromises. As the 1-year anniversary of my canceled wedding approached, I found myself in a place of reflection rather than regret. The man I had become was stronger, more self-assured, and clearer about my values than the person who had almost married Amanda. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth the struggle. My career continued to flourish. The focus I had channeled into work during the darkest days had resulted in a significant promotion. I now led my own team of developers with a substantial raise in equity in the company. Financial independence had been an unexpected benefit of standing up for myself, removing any lingering worries about potential fallout from opposing Uncle Richard. My relationship with Zoe had developed gradually and authentically. Unlike the whirlwind romance with Amanda, our connection grew from friendship, shared values, and honest communication. We had been officially dating for 4 months, taking things at a pace that felt respectful of our past experiences. I found myself able to trust again, though, with a wisdom I had lacked before. The family landscape had changed dramatically over the year. Amanda and Jackson's relationship had imploded spectacularly just 3 months after my canceled wedding. According to family gossip, Jackson had repeated his pattern of betrayal with the real estate agent I had heard about earlier. Amanda had tried to contact me after their breakup, but I maintained my distance, wishing her healing without wanting to be part of it. Uncle Richard's influence over the family had diminished noticeably. My stand against him had inspired others to question his authority, particularly when the contrast between his defense of Jackson's behavior and the eventual implosion of Jackson's relationship with Amanda made his judgment seem flawed. He remained wealthy and powerful, but the unquestioning deference he had once enjoyed had eroded. Most significantly, my relationship with my parents had entered a new phase. They had taken concrete steps toward financial independence from Richard, downsizing to a smaller home and adjusting their lifestyle expectations. Dad's part-time consulting work had expanded, and Mom's jewelry business was gaining traction online. They were not completely free from Richard's influence, but they were making progress that seemed unimaginable a year earlier. I invited my parents to dinner at my apartment the first time they had visited, since Zoe had begun leaving her mark on the space with art pieces and plants. Mom brought a homemade pie, a peace offering that reminded me of childhood dinners before financial entanglements had complicated our family relationships. Over dinner, Dad cleared his throat and addressed what we had all been dancing around. He acknowledged their failure as parents when I needed them most. It was not a generic apology, but a specific recognition of how they had prioritized financial security and family appearances over standing up for what was right. Mom added that watching me rebuild my life on my terms had inspired them to reconsider their own choices and dependencies. I did not offer easy forgiveness. Instead, I shared honestly how their betrayal had affected me, while also expressing appreciation for their current efforts to change. We agreed that trust would need to be rebuilt gradually through actions rather than promises. It was the most authentic conversation we had shared in years, painful but necessary for genuine healing. As they were leaving, Mom hugged me tighter than usual and whispered that she was proud of the man I had become, especially in the face of such challenges. It was a small moment, but it felt like the beginning of a healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or financial dependency. The lessons I had learned through this ordeal were profound and lasting. I understood now that true loyalty cannot be bought or manipulated through financial control. I had seen firsthand how money can corrupt family bonds when it becomes the primary currency of relationships. Most importantly, I had discovered my own capacity for standing alone when necessary rather than compromising my integrity for acceptance or security. The freedom I found in being true to myself far outweighed the temporary comfort of going along with Richard's manipulative plans. By refusing to participate in the cover-up, I had forced everyone involved to face the consequences of their actions and make conscious choices about their priorities. Some relationships were lost in the process, but those that remained or developed afterward were built on more authentic foundations. Looking back, I could see how losing what I thought was my perfect future had actually guided me toward what I truly needed. The path had been painful, but it led to a life aligned with my values, surrounded by people who demonstrated loyalty through actions rather than convenient words. I had learned to trust my own judgment, even when it meant standing against those I had once trusted implicitly. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it seemed like everyone was against you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more experiences about finding strength in difficult circumstances. Remember that your worth is not determined by those who betray you, but by your courage to remain true to yourself even when it would be easier to compromise. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the strength to stand firm in your own values whatever challenges you might face.